KMF 2024, How to Boost Malaysia's Workforce. Here is a statistic. Our female labor force participation rate stood at 55.5% in 2021, lagging significantly behind our peers, South Korea, Singapore, and Thailand. To chart the path from the probable to the possible, this suggests that we have an untapped area of leverage in Malaysia, one that we can harness for greater economic and societal development. So let us now invite Nurazeyan Khalis, Director of Strategic Human Capital Management, Khazanah, to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Alice Evans, Senior Lecturer in the Social Science of Development, King's College London.
Good afternoon, everyone. Talent, the availability of talent, the nurturing and harnessing of talent, the retention of talent. It's something we think a lot about in Khazanah, not just at an organizational level, but at a national level. As we stand at the precipice of an opportunity for Malaysia to take a big leap forward, it is even more imperative for Malaysia to harness our talent and develop our collective brain to navigate this increasingly complex world and harvest those potatoes. But with female labor force participation in Malaysia hovering at a paltry 53%, there are clearly untapped sources of talent that may be holding us back from achieving our potential as a country. Just illustratively, of all the speakers at KMF this year, one has to note that only 32% of the speakers are female. Sorry, Nick. I don't doubt that you are a feminist and are trying to do your part in trying to dismantle the patriarchy, but still, it is quite clear that there is untapped talent, even in this room today. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Alice Evans, who is here to share with us her thoughts on this talent dilemma. Dr. Evans is a senior lecturer at King's College London. As an accomplished social scientist, her research has taken her all around the world, from Zimbabwe to Uzbekistan, and explores the themes of gender, urbanization, the drivers of social change, inequality, and global production networks. Dr. Evans is also currently writing a book about the great gender divergence, about why societies have become more gender equal, but some more equal than others. If you haven't already, I really encourage you to check out her Substack and her podcast. I swear to God, she didn't pay me to say this, where she asks thought-provoking questions like, why is management so male? Why isn't female employment enough to erode the patriarchy? Is romantic love an underrated driver of gender equality? And most chillingly, are robots replacing women? Without further ado, here is Dr. Evans to share her thoughts with us on how to boost Malaysia's workforce.
Thank you so much. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is an absolute honor and a privilege to join you all in beautiful Kuala Lumpur. So, I am fascinated by the pursuit of potatoes. And I think that people, so people are ideas, people are innovators. It is people who discover and harness the power of potatoes, whether it is the spectacular Malaysians who are doing archaeological digs, people in corporate, people in private equity, people working in government, figuring out how to solve these knotty problems. So what I think a major driver of structural transformation is to expand the workforce. So I'm all about that. So I kind of wear two hats. Yes, I'm a lecturer in economic development, which means I'm focused on helping Malaysia get rich. And in fact, tomorrow I'm giving 2 days' time, I'm giving my lecture on industrial policy. So if you want to talk about global production chains, I'm all here. But I also study culture, and specifically looking at gender and thinking about how these two insights can help us foster prosperity. So Oh yeah, these are the places in which I've done research on gender. So whether that's going into Aztec pyramids, I lived for 9 months in a desert in the Gambia, hiking into the Atlas Mountains, living in a swamp, a slum in Zambia, going through Turkey, India, Southeast Asia, right? So I listen to people, I try to understand their stories, but I also draw on economics and big data to work out big structural trends. So, drawing on that knowledge, studying change over time, what I want to talk about is the importance of a large, innovative workforce, because this propels economic growth. Now, we have two important drivers how we can increase the size of the workforce in Malaysia. One is fertility, and the other is female employment, and we'll discuss both of those today. So if you look at Malaysia's workforce is actually rather low. So the graph on the left shows GDP and female labor force participation. As you can see, that relative to Malaysia's GDP, it's actually slightly fewer women working. But really, if we look at our neighbors, if we look at Singapore, Cambodia, Thailand, Vietnam, they've got many more women working, right? If you could just get to Thailand's level of female employment, boom, you expand your workforce by 20 percentage points. That is great. That is many more people discovering potatoes. We want that. Now, the other big risk is over here. Fertility, as previously highlighted, has plummeted globally. And Malaysia is now below replacement. Now, this has big, big implications for the future workforce, economic growth, and also government revenue. Both of these things need to be tackled in order to get those people tackling potatoes. Now, you may think, oh, Alice, maybe those two are at odds. No, they're not. Research in Malaysia and also more globally find there's absolutely no correlation. You can have the best of both worlds, right? Win-win. More women in the workforce and more babies. If we have the right economic and social policies in place, right? Getting the policies right is key to getting the best of both worlds. And that's what I'm going to talk about. So, why does fertility matter? High fertility means a youthful population. So, young people are innovators. They're more likely to start companies. They're more likely to be entrepreneurs. That's great for labor productivity. There's also less dependency. So as Malaysia ages, that means more old people relying on a few young people. That's not great for growth. It's not great for government revenue. It makes it harder to get rich. So really, we want to keep those fertility numbers up. Now, by 2050, 25% of Malaysians will be over 60. So that is a very high dependency ratio. And that is what we want to try to mitigate by getting the right policies in place. Now, why do I think this is happening? So by studying fertility trends and demographics worldwide, I think one big driver is the educational arms race. So as we see a rising premium for skills, high-skilled workers make more money, we get this skill-biased technological change, and this drives an educational arms race, in that every parent is investing an enormous amount, both financially and emotionally, into sort of turbocharging that child, whether you're sending your children to private tuition, like most Malaysians do, or whether you're sending them to international schools, which are incredibly expensive. So all of that makes parenting draining. It makes it absolutely exhausting. So I was actually on, this is an extract from a Malaysian woman on Reddit, right? She says, I just entered my 40s and have been child-free with my partner. My parents and my relatives always gave me an impression that they are not happy. It made me feel that growing up as a woman is all about suffering. Parenthood is ugly, requires hard work, and non-stop 24 hours. Now, if young people have the perception that parenting is tough, if they have the perception that it's a slog, it's exhausting, it erodes their freedoms and their enjoyment and their leisure time, they're less likely to have large families. They may have 0, or they may only have 1, and fertility will continue to plummet. So what we need is to support happy families, right? To make having a big family enjoyable, right? You need a family-friendly society. That is absolutely important. We do not want people to have this. And that had 400 likes on Reddit, right? So we need to support people. And I tell you a stat, over 60% of Malaysians worry about their children, specifically worrying about their children's education. So that constant angst and anxiety is really not going to help with fertility. So one, I think that educational arms race is making parenting super tough, and it's not enjoyable for many. So that's one aspect. So let's park the fertility story there. Now, here's the other aspect of expanding the workforce. Now, the Prime Minister, in his economic strategy, point 24, says we need to expand and increase female labour force participation up to 60%. And I am absolutely with him. I think this is not just probable, but possible, if we harness the right policies. So let me share some ideas based on my research. So let me give you three bits of good news. First point is, Malaysian female participation is up. It's up, and that's great. And so we want to continue to be going up on that trend. What we also find is that young women are especially likely to work. So Malaysian women under 29, about 70% of them are in the workforce, right? Another good news is that university graduates are most likely to work. So as young people increasingly go to universities, predominantly women, they're more likely to work. Now, why is this happening? I think it's two reasons. First of all, university graduates can command a higher salary, and then they can pay for care concerns, right? If they have a child, they can pay for a nanny, they can pay for a daycare. Whereas the big issue is that many secondary school educated women can literally not afford to work. If the childcare is not there, if they do not have sufficient support, then it doesn't even make sense to work. Especially if, say, a Malaysian school does a morning shift and an afternoon shift. That double-day system is absolutely killing working mothers. Because how can you get a full-time job if you're supposed to pick up your kid at 1 o'clock? So instead, a woman might do a part-time job. But part-time work is overwhelmingly low-paid, low-status, tedious, drudgery. So you may decide it's just not worth it if you're factoring the commute as well. So secondary school, primary educated women, so one is that the care costs, but also, that work might be more stigmatized, less pleasant, whereas tertiary educated women can do nice, fulfilling, exciting jobs like I'm sure all of you have, right? We want people to be doing fun, exciting, fulfilling, respected jobs. That's super, super important. So universities are great. Now, fun fact, if we look at, so Malaysia has seen rising university enrollment, but it's actually way below some of our other countries. So if we look at tertiary education in Malaysia, far left, top left, pretty small compared to, say, Singapore over here. So earlier today, we've been talking about industrial policy, right? So if Malaysia wants to get into those high productivity sectors, we need a very skilled workforce. And this has become more important now than ever because what we've seen is that automation and robots are displacing low-end supply chains. They're displacing low-end routine tasks. So you need a super, super educated workforce in order to move into those high productivity sectors which cannot be outdone by robots. You need to capitalize on the human edge. So we absolutely want a skilled workforce. That's vital for any country that's had successful industrial policy. It was certainly vital for East Asia. So that's super crucial. Okay, so here is our big question. How can we support innovative and ambitious minds? How can Malaysia become more family-friendly? And I think the solution lies in both infrastructure and culture. Now, earlier today, when people were discussing industrial policy, they introduced the idea of the government stepping in to solve coordination problems, right? So you have all these firms eager to discover potatoes, but sometimes they've got collective action problems. And that's where the government can play a really important role in alleviating those constraints. And we can think about this both in terms of infrastructure and in terms of culture. So let me suggest. So if we look at this graph on the left, the big yellow lines, the big yellow bar graph is rising enrollment in preschool, age 4 to 6. And with rising female employment, that's going up and up and up. More families are using childcare services because they need them, because they can afford them, and more women are going to work. However, there may be a very important constraint for the preschool kids below 4 that may be undersupplied in the market. And in fact, just today, a new economics paper came out looking at Connecticut. So Connecticut, in the United States, now has universal pre-K, that's a universal kindergarten education. And what did they find? After that policy, family income increased by 20%. That is enormous. That is absolutely enormous. Because what happened is that women transitioned from part-time to full-time. And now you may be thinking, wait, but the Malaysian government no way can afford to spend all of this. what they found is that for every $1 of government spending, the benefits were $1.30. I mean, you're the investors, but that seems like a pretty good return, right? So we invest in preschools, we invest in childcare, and the government is acting to address those coordination problems, enabling brilliant minds right across Malaysia to go out and discover potatoes full time, right? Not to be a part-time potato discoverer, okay? Thank you. Okay, so what we also find is if we're looking across Malaysian states, there's a lot of heterogeneity in rates of female employment. Maybe on the West Coast, it's a bit higher. And we find that in states where there's higher female employment, there's also more childcare. Now, we need to be careful about causation here, but these two go hand in hand, right? If the government steps in, just as it can with industrial policy, to solve those coordination problems, then boom, you unleash these diggers, right? These female diggers, they can get to work. And that's fabulous for families, that's fabulous for growth, that's fabulous for government revenue. So that's super, super valuable. Okay. So we need to think about family-friendly infrastructure because we're trying to do this win-win policy, right? We're trying to encourage women into the workforce and simultaneously wanting to make families a happy, lovely story, not a terrible, stressful event, right? So if the government steps in, people can have babies and they can work. Win-win. So there are other ideas that we can think about is preschools, but also extending the school day, as I was saying earlier. So right across many developing countries, because of cash constraints, governments have chosen to do like double sessions, right? Kids come in the morning or they come in the afternoon. So you reuse the school buildings, you reuse the teachers. And what they found in Latin America, because Latin America has seen rising female employment, many countries like Mexico, like Chile, like Colombia, have extended the school day. They've introduced single sessions. And what have economic studies found? Boom. Female labor force participation goes up because women can work a longer day, they can get higher paid work, more fulfilling work. So these two things go absolutely hand in hand. It's a way of government solving coordination problems. So that's one important idea. So that's infrastructure. That's our infrastructure hat. Now we need to talk about culture. So the World Values Survey, which is an international representative survey, has asked people a bunch of attitudinal questions. They say, when jobs are scarce, men should have more right. Now, let me tell you the results for Malaysia. Almost 80% of Malaysian men agree. Women are not so sure, right? Malaysian women aren't quite so convinced. And you know, there's a nice new Malaysian paper that was kindly sent to me, and they show that this is precisely correlated with female employment. So in families where people believe that men are more entitled to jobs, women are less likely to work. So culture is a major constraint, both in terms of people's internalized ideologies, what they themselves believe, but also their concerns about how they will be perceived by their wider community. So everyone in the world wants to be respected. Everyone in the world wants status, social inclusion. So they pay very close attention to what their peers do and what their peers respect. And this, again, creates another collective action problem. So let me show you some more data. So my friends over at Chicago, they did this very nice study with Gallup, and they asked men two questions. One, do you support female employment? Two, do you think people in your neighborhood support female employment? And what they find is that systematically, right across the world, and here in South Asia, men systematically underestimate support for female employment. So men think that their peers will think that they're losers or they think that they're failures if they can't support their families single-handedly, right? And so this means that, again, you have another collective action problem, that everyone is thinking, oh no, people in my neighborhood might not be supportive, so no one does it, so no one sees it, right? So you have a vicious feedback loop, a negative feedback loop. The other really important aspect of culture is maternal guilt. So I speak to brilliant minds, brilliant women all over the world, you know, entrepreneurs, big businesses, small businesses, women working at markets. And so often women tell me that they can feel guilty, right? If they're not there to pick up their children from school, to make them a wonderful meal. I think, Malaysia must have the best food in the world. If you can't make this delicious Malaysian, home-cooked meal for your child, then maybe you're not a good mother, right? And that kind of anxiety, that kind of anguish, that kind of guilt might mean that a woman doesn't want to use care services. She doesn't want to use a nanny because she might be failing on some part. Every parent wants to be the best. They want the best for their children. They love and care for their children. And that feeling of being a failure, that painful feeling, could mean that instead of going out into the labor market, instead of digging for potatoes, she's making a very delicious Malaysian meal. Now, that's nice for her child, but not so great for economic growth. Now, families can make their own trade-offs, and I totally respect those choices, but some of this is just in our heads, right? So, the Germans actually have a word for this. They have a word for women who go out to work and leave their children at home. They call it a Rabenmutter. It means a raven mother, right? She's fleeing the nest. So across the world, women might be vilified for leaving their children behind. But this stigma, this anxiety is all in our heads, and it's not necessary, right? So time and time again, if you have quality infrastructure, if you have quality schools, quality preschools, then children can do super, super well, right? Especially the least privileged. The least privileged can do super, super well if there's quality care. So we need to tackle the stuff that's going on in our heads that's eroding, that's creating pain and anxiety. So again, we have this big question. How can the government step in to solve these coordination problems? Both men worrying about being judged and women's concerns about anxiety and guilt. How can the government step in to play that vital coordination role, just as it might with industrial policy? Now, I think the next thing I'm going to say will surprise you. So, Saudi Arabia. I want to talk about Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia has massively increased its level of female employment, right? It's still way below Malaysia, but boom, look at that steep rise. Look at that steep rise. So now it's up to 35% from a very low baseline. Now, Saudi Arabia always had much lower female employment because male honor depended on female seclusion. That a man's status and respectability depended on keeping his daughter, wife, sister behind closed doors. Now, MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, now is trying to do industrial policy, just like Malaysia. They want to diversify. They want to expand their labor force. But again, they face this same collective action problem, that Saudi men really worried about how other men would perceive them. Right? So if he lets his wife go into the work, maybe others would, shame him, maybe he would lose status. So people are really concerned. Now, how did Saudi Arabia overcome this collective action problem? What did they do? Because clearly they did something right. Now, with my interviews with Saudis and analyzing lots of big data, I think I've tracked it. So Shahid MBC is Saudi state-funded media. This is like the Saudi version of Netflix. Anyone can subscribe to it. I'm a subscriber. And the Saudi state funds lots of films and lots of TV shows celebrating women working, as if it's a totally normal thing. So how this addresses collective action is it just shows women working and it shows care as if all other Saudis are doing it. So it's alleviating anxieties. No longer is male honor dependent on female seclusion, because all this media narrative, people are watching TV, enjoying TV, suggests that it's totally fine. So this is one of their shows, Cloud Kitchen, about women chefs in Saudi Arabia. And this is the really important point. It's not showing Western shows. It's showing, here are people just like you, and they're going to work. This is totally normal. This is totally fine. This is totally respectable. There's no problem. So these are all the Saudi, look at these, you can watch Bollywood too, but all these women out and about digging for potatoes. The Saudi state wants women digging for potatoes, right? It's solving the collective action problem. Now, this is an Egyptian show. This is an Egyptian version of a US TV show called The Good Wife. It's all about a man who's a politician, cheats on his wife and does an embezzlement corruption scandal, so she goes back to work as a lawyer. The Saudi state is showing that. It wants its women digging for potatoes because it wants industrial policy, and it knows that if you want productivity, you've got to harness all your talents. So that's how the Saudi state, it's used culture, it's used films to show everyone this is totally fine, this is totally acceptable. And I think that's quite interesting. Okay, one more thing. Now, I don't know, maybe I don't know how many of you know these things, but so I was talking earlier about mothers being concerned about, giving their children to a care service. In the UK, in the US, I think they alleviated this anxiety specifically with two key films. One is Mary Poppins. So she's this fabulous nanny who comes to London to look after the kids, and she's wonderful, she's loving, and the kids have a wonderful time. There's this other show we have, Nanny McPhee, again, very loving, warm, perfectly competent characters, just making it totally normal to use care services. So TV is great. Okay, one more thing. So Dewepke and others have a nice paper showing that across the world, fertility is much higher when men do a higher share of care work. So when dads are engaged, when they're bathing kids, taking kids, collecting kids, you get women much happier to have kids, right? If a woman thinks, if I have a child, it's going to take a massive hit to my salary, I'll end up in a low-status, low-paid job, and my husband is going to go out in the evenings, they may be a little bit reluctant. In Spain, which has very low fertility, a new study just came out, and they found that men time their paternity leave to coincide with the World Cup. No jokes. But, imagine you're a Spanish woman, how willing, how eager are you to have a kid if you think that, men are just going to be watching TV, playing Call of Duty or World of Warcraft? Not very, right? That's the solution to the fertility crisis right there. So when you have more engaged men, when you have men say, yes, we're going to do this together, we're a team, we're a partnership, then women can embrace that as a loving, happy family, right? So my message is that by making Malaysia more family-friendly, 1, in terms of infrastructure, 2, in terms of films and culture, 3, in terms of engaged dads, that's how we get the best of both worlds, right? Boosting fertility and raising female labor force participation. So it's people discover potatoes, and we need infrastructure, we need to erode stigma, and we want engaged fathers. Look, see, this is a little photo I took in Central Market the other day. So that's me, and I welcome to all questions, and I thank you so much for your time. Oh, yes, thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Alice. I just loved how, I could hear all these nervous laughter coming from a lot of the men in the room as you talked about, men's participation in the family and making sure they do their fair share at home. I'd like to invite some questions from the floor. Please do introduce yourself with your name, which organization you represent, as you ask your question. I see one at the back over there. Yeah, maybe number 3.
Hello. Yeah, Darawati here. I am very exhausted from listening to you. Wow. So my question is, I just want to understand whether your data takes into consideration the trend of, I guess, the young women being a social influencer, doing more, not your regular type jobs, but giving them more flexibility. I mean, how has your numbers kind of incorporated that? And, and in terms of the recommendations that you're talking about, how would that translate to sort of like boosting productivity if there was a lot more flexibility in the types of work that women might take on instead of your normal 9-to-5 kind of factory jobs or working in corporate things? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. So with labor force surveys, which Malaysia has, they ask a range of questions, not just about formal work, but also, did you do any work getting paid for? And so I think the labor statistics are pretty good there. So we can be pretty confident about those numbers. And you're talking about labor market flexibility. And I think if you think about it from the perspective of firms, right? So we're talking about semiconductors. Any place that's manufacturing, they want workers and they want to exploit those workers. They want them to work a long, solid day, not to leave at 1 p.m. right? So from the perspective of employers, they want hands-on, committed, reliable workers, and employers will discriminate against women if they have a signal that women are just going to leave early. So it's very, very vital that women can respond to demand and enable Malaysia's industrial policy.
Yes. Maybe at the back, number 6 first.
Hi, I'm Serena from IOI. So I'm really, really impressed of the way your energy has, shown to us that women can be in the workforce. Now, I have had a lot of staff, and a lot of them are women, and they have repeatedly stated that some of the problems that they have are essentially on the men's side, because when the children are sick, the women are the one who takes care and the man goes fishing. So this is a very, very, I'm just giving you an example, but this is quite prevalent. So I think it's not just about changing policy, it's changing the mindset. And in Malaysia, unfortunately, it is subconscious. It's not very overt. A lot of men say that they support, but they don't. So I think the problem is very cultural. If you look at the movies that we have, a lot of them shows men going out having younger wives or many wives, while the women seem to accept it. So it's also the part of the women being the fact that they accept that this is the way it goes. So I think it's more than just policy, it's also about culture. So I think what my question is, how do you go about trying to make sure that this cultural change, and with all due respect with MBS, Saudi Arabia is a very low, you're starting from a very low base. So I think we need to look at more, more examples that can have that change in the mindset, and what are the incentives for the men to change their minds. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I absolutely agree. It's about culture. The reason I give the Saudi example is I'm trying to say, even in the most difficult case, even in cases where female employment was really, really low, because male honor was so important, change is still possible. And that change primarily occurred through, exactly as you say, addressing culture. So the Malaysian government, in combination with private equity, in combination with brilliant creatives, can start making more films that challenge these coordination problems, that show engaged fathers, that celebrate families working together, and that celebrate working mothers. So I absolutely agree with what you say, and we can really play a coordinating role in shifting the media landscape.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think we had a question from the male perspective in the front over here.
Thank you for your sharing. No, I have no problem with your perspective. My issue was what you presented was very focused in terms of getting women to contribute to the workforce and participation in the workforce from a family role perspective. I have no issue on that because, well, I have also men who stays at home and look after the children, and the ladies build a career and pursue the potatoes. I have no issue. It's just that somehow I was trying to connect what you share so passionately with the title, How to Boost Malaysia's Workforce. In my mind, I was thinking about how do you contribute to improving productivity of the workforce in Malaysia. And in my mind, a lot of things was running through, like how do you engage artificial intelligence to connect and build higher consumer touch point so that you improve productivity in terms of your consumer connection. We have aging population in the farming community, and we have concern about food security. How do you get youngsters who have left their parents aging in the farms, and they are getting weaker by the day, and we are not leveraging technology, drones, and all form of technology to help improve productivity of the workforce in the farming community and improving our food security. I mean, in my mind, I have dozens of other things relating to the title and not what you are presenting. What you present is perfect, except it's only one dimension of improving Malaysian productivity. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. And I think that there are two really key elements here that you rightly addressed. One is expanding the size of the workforce, both now in terms of female labor force participation, in the future in terms of younger generations and fertility, and exactly as you said, labor productivity. So that's why I highlighted the university enrollment, right? If we want to move into AI, if we want to move into semiconductors, if we want more innovations in AI, you need to get more people in university and to improve the quality of that education. So absolutely, it's all those three aspects. It's the bigger size, bigger population in the future, and more skills. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have quite a number of questions on the side here. Number 2.
Hello, it's me, Ryan, from Khazanah. I'm from the research team. And I'm just going to ask about the male perspective to maybe offset it a little bit. What is the take on like men stay-at-home dads, you know? Maybe like the perspective of the public would be like, oh, a stay-at-home dad is not able to provide for his family and whatnot. Maybe that is the prevention from dad saying that, oh, here, my wife can go out and work and I will become a stay-at-home dad.
Thank you so much. And I think you highlight a really important point in that many men are constrained. They're concerned about how they'll be perceived by the wider community. They're worried about stigma. They're worried about how others might judge them if they deviate slightly. And that, again, is where culture and films can play a really important role in enabling a diverse people to explore their pursuits and what makes them happy and contribute to Malaysia's growth. Thank you.
You have to be able to see it to be able to emulate
Absolutely,
it, right?
absolutely.
Okay, number 3.
So Alice, my name is Iqbal Khan. I think to increase the participation of women across the Islamic world, we have to go back to our heritage. In Islamic finance, when the Prophet was an asset manager, and he managed the money of a lady called Lady Khadija. So she was an investor. And he gave her excellent returns, and she doubled her money, tripled her money. By the time she became so impressed by the character of Prophet Muhammad that she got married to him. And remember, she was 15 years older than him, and yet she proposed for him to get married. So in the Islamic history, there is a lot of tradition. The Prophet gave the right for women to property, to inheritance, and the dowry, which is the meher which is paid, which a man has to pay to the woman, belongs to the woman. So there is a very, very rich tradition, and I think we need to get our ulama, our scholars, to talk about the role which women played at that time. They went to the battlefield, they were advising on medical matters. So we have a very rich heritage, which I think as we build this plan all across. In Saudi Arabia, there is a big effort which is going to be launched very shortly, where all the mosques will be talking about women's participation. So I just wanted to raise that point. Thank you.
I think that's an absolutely vital and fundamental point, and I'm so glad that you raised it. I think that to support cultural change, it needs to resonate with what people value. So where you have religious leaders who are held in great authority and legitimacy, if some of them could be brought on board to celebrate and champion this agenda, I think that would be incredibly powerful. Absolutely, 100% agree. Thank you.
He has a rebuttal.
There is a verse in the Quran which says, for men is what they have earned, and for women is what they have earned. And that is interpreted as equal pay for men and women. This is 1,400 years ago.
Well, yeah, another really important hadith, yes. Another very important hadith, which can be held across the Muslim world, is that paradise lies at the mother's feet, right? And then the question is, how can we make Malaysia a place where paradise lies at the mother's feet? And I thank you so much for that contribution.
Okay, number 2 at the back.
Thank you, Nurazeyan. Dr. Alice Evans, good job. Thank you. Database research. Perhaps that's something I think Malaysian women, or actually all Malaysians here would agree on. There's a sliver of information that may be missing from the work here, which is the unregulated daycare centers for babies. We've seen the news on death. We've seen the news of a lot of abuses in childcare centers. That is, I think, a very, very important reason where we need more regulation, if you agree. So thank you very much.
I think that, so yes, absolutely. So referring to the very terrible and recent revelations of child abuse. And that is why I was earlier saying the infrastructure is so important, right? There needs to be quality childcare so that people's children are safe. Because if people are distrustful, they won't do it, right? So absolutely 100%. There needs to be quality, regulated, good childcare for all Malaysian children, not just the richest. Thank you so much, 100%.
Okay, thank you. Number 3 on the side.
All right, thank you. Dr. Alice, that was a very great presentation. Love the energy. So I'm Imran, also from research. I think our research division is quite equal in terms of gender representation. Thank you, Nick.
Good job, Nick.
Anyway, so my question is simply like, a lot of these proposals, while they prove highly effective, they will take a lot of time, you know, to plant the seeds. Creating films can be done overnight. So what can we do on day one, like say tomorrow, we can implement some sort of change effective immediately? What kind of changes can we do to help boost Malaysia's workforce?
Thank you so much. So I understand that there are fiscal constraints, but I think, like all investors, you think of the long-run returns. So yes, you know, increasing and having single sessions, long school days that finish at 3:30 for all children is very expensive, but you need to think of the counterfactual of what will happen if Malaysia does not do that. Then fertility will continue to tank, and then we have real problems in terms of growth, government revenue, etc. So thank you. I think doubling the school day is super important.
Okay, I'm just going to edge in my own question.
Yes,
To touch on that, Dr. Evans. So I think you've studied Singapore quite extensively, right? So obviously the Singaporean government started, you know, pro-fertility policies in the late 80s. But I believe that their fertility rates have reached a new low quite recently. So what can we learn about the efficacy of these policies from our neighbors down south?
That's a great point. So in Singapore, I think there is a more intense version of the educational arms race. So in Singaporean schools, they teach the 5 C's that you want: cash car, credit card, condominium, and country club. And it's the relentless pursuit of all those things and getting your kids to have the highest possible quality of life. And the lion's share of that falls on parents. It just makes it so tough. And even in Singapore, the men's share of care work is much larger than it is in much of the USA and Europe. So again, the question is, even though there have been some incentives, the private cost of care is still undercounted for. The social cost is too small, and we need engaged fathers. We need men to step up to support and make families a wonderful thing.
Yeah, so I think that's the answer, that low-hanging fruits. Men can step up today, tomorrow. Okay, at the back, number 5.
Hi, Dr. Evans. Thank you so much for your presentation. Adler from Khazanah. Just a question on, do you think a minimum quota system for the amount of females within the workforce is something that may be beneficial? And is there any data supplementing that? And maybe a question to Jan. Has Khazanah ever considered in placing or establishing a minimum quota system for the amount of females in the organization?
Thank you so much. So I think that affirmative action can play a role, but I actually don't think those are the major constraints. You know, if you've got a double school day, then women are, you know, even if you say we want X amount of women, it may be difficult to find those women if they can't afford childcare. So I think these other constraints, the care constraints, are primary. But you're right, there are multiple hypotheses, there are multiple possible levers, and what any good government does is it does a pilot study, it tests it, it evaluates it with both quantitative and qualitative research. So if we take this challenge challenge seriously of the government playing a coordination role to boost the workforce, yeah, let's try a range of policies in different places, evaluate them, and see what works best with that sort of exploratory mindset. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Maybe just to, thanks for putting me in the hot seat, Adlan. Your question on whether Khazanah has decided to put any quotas on hiring, male, female. We don't. We look at merit most importantly, but I think you can see even from your graduate trainee cohort, we've done very well in terms of making sure that there is a good balance between men and women, and we continue to do that as we go forward. So thank you. Okay, one question over there, number 4.
Hello, doctor. What a great presentation. Right, okay, I'm Suli from Sarawak. Okay, I've seen two situations of women employment. Okay, example, like in KL, what I could see here, like most of the women around my mom's age are still working, right? Okay, I believe that they work because of the life force, all right? Okay, back in Sarawak, mostly women like around my mom's age, they're just enjoying the jobless life, all right? Okay, based on that statistic, how should we take it? Do we have to celebrate it or see it as a good thing or what? Because, yeah, I see this two different situation. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. So I think that around the world, people have very diverse preferences, right? So I'm not here to say what is good or bad or how people should behave. All I'm suggesting is that if Malaysia wants to boost its economic growth, then it's got a secret weapon right here that's undercapitalizing on, and that's its brilliant population. So people can do what they like, but here's the secret ingredient that maybe we're not using as much as we could.
Okay, and that is all the time that we have. Thank you so much, Dr. Evans, for your energy, your insight. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Evans and Yan. Please step forward so we can take a photograph to commemorate this feature address.